Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. Today we'll be having a look at the brand new Masters of the Universe Masterverse New Eternia Thunder Punch He-Man. Try to say that 5 times fast. Anyway, this is a figure that I've really been looking forward to, and I've gotten him just as soon as I possibly could. And so I can't wait to bring you a review of this guy. But before we begin, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss out on all the Masters of the Universe goodness right here on the channel. And be sure to like the video if you end up enjoying the content today. With all that out of the way, let's begin. Let's talk a little bit about what this even is. This is part of the Mattel kind of collector product range that they do. That's done in more of that 6.5-inch scale. Of course, this isn't Masters of the Universe Origins. This line is kind of adjacent to that line. It celebrates that larger scale and the premium articulation and detail. Of course, this is kind of Mattel's answer to the old Masters of the Universe Classics line. You can see that on the front, we have the incredible high standard of box art that's being kept up. I really think it's cool that they actually have New Eternia Skeletor down here. It feels like it's been forever since that figure came out. They're even using more of the demon head that he came with. And this artwork of He-Man is some of the very best in the line. I especially like how you can see Snake Mountain over here. Over here, I really love these shots of Thunder Punch He-Man, especially the headshot right there. And on the back, have some product shots, a few little things about the action features, and a little bio. He-Man dons the ancient Thunder Punch armor and defends the recovered arcane artifact, the Eye of Grayskull, against Skeletor's entire army. And you can see a little cross-sell at the bottom. If you're looking for this guy, and if this helps you, here is the barcode. And here he is, Thunder Punch He-Man, right out of the packaging in all of his glory. So let's definitely go ahead and have a look at everything that this figure offers. This is kind of a more complex release. As a matter of fact, it's a little shocking that it's a basic figure and not a deluxe. Definitely let's talk about the sculpting first, which is where I usually like to start. We're actually pretty familiar with this He-Man head, and it's the thing that most people are going to draw attention to right away because it's kind of controversial, as almost every single He-Man head that comes out in this line tends to be. You're going to have defenders and detractors, and I'll tell you where I stand here in just a little bit. But this is a familiar sculpt because indeed this is the exact same sculpt, the same face sculpt, the same hair sculpt that we saw with the Faker in this line that came out just a little while back. Since then, there's been a lot of folks who have talked about how they were anxious to see it used on He-Man. And sure enough, since that time, it finally happened. As a matter of fact, you may have caught my He-Man countdown video I did a little while back, where it was the very day after I filmed it that they announced this He-Man. So, of course, you know, who knows how this would change the rankings, but we may have to do an update at some point. Moving on, we can actually see that the figure utilizes the brand new upper chest sculpting that we've seen, at least I think it's new anyway, that goes with the brand new He-Man that they have out for the Battle Armor version that's in the Masters of the Universe Revolution line. You can see that he does use the updated kind of revisionist classic He-Man belt, neo-classic, whatever you want to say, that we've seen with some of the other new Eternia releases of the character and the familiar loincloth. This is a very soft plastic, and you can see under it we just have a brown Speedo or whatever. Of course, the legs and the boots are all familiar sculpting, but I think the big difference right here is the paint work. This is something we've not quite seen before on a He-Man in this line, and that's full accent painting all over the body. You can see the paint work down here around the legs, the abs, and the pectorals. And of course, we'll be getting into more of that when we take some of that armor off so we can get a better look. Now, the harness, of course, is probably the most defining feature of Thunder Punch He-Man. Now, I'll go ahead and reveal a bias that I have. Thunder Punch He-Man is my favorite variation of He-Man that there is. I have always been fascinated by Thunder Punch. I love the addition of red to the classic He-Man look. And I just think that the way that the chest logo looks, the way that the harness comes together, really complements He-Man, and so does thunder punching kind of lightning powers. I think that really does a lot for him. I love their take on the classic vest. It pretty much retains everything that we expect about that classic logo, although they have changed the shaping a little bit, which I find interesting. Interestingly enough, it now looks kind of more like the shape of the Superman S shield. So I think that's kind of surprising. Usually it's flat on the bottom, but here it does come down to a point. But honestly, I think it really works for this particular vision of what this would be like. So yeah, I do think it works here. Moving on to the back, we definitely have an interesting take on the backpack here. I love all the extra little like techie bits and details that they've added to the backpack. In terms of paint, it's not as elaborate as, say, what they did with like Masters Universe Classics, which we'll look at a comparison of later. But certainly sculpturally, it is just about as impressive. And I really do like the additional little kind of arrows and things. But we could also see really cool sculpt work like that on the original as well as the Origins release. So it's not surprising. I think it's kind of interesting that the dial is more prominent on the back here, and we'll get into that comparison later. The only other big change that we're really seeing with this thing is the addition of these arm gauntlets. And this is a really interesting thing. We've never seen this before on any version of Thunder Punch He-Man. And they're kind of like bracers that go over the arms, almost as if there is like a mechanical component to He-Man's powers, his expansion here. This is referred to as the legendary Thunder Punch armor that it talks about. So it appears that almost the costume is creating this. At least that's what I get from seeing these kind of bracers that go on the arms and things. In this new Eternia lore, it's almost like that he's powering up with, a mechanical upgrade more than a magical upgrade. But that's pure speculation and just something I found interesting. And you can see he has the exact same thing going on over here. I actually like these, and they seem to add a little bit more of an alternate costume for this He-Man. These are completely removable, and we will end up having a look at what he looks like without those things. And we can't cover Sculpt adequately without also talking about the shield. Now, the shield, in terms of Thunder Punch He-Man, is always a major part of his look. And here, this shield is no slouch, I have to say. I really love what they've done here. They have a really cool H logo. And not only that, but the sword kind of acts as a brace to have kind of the caps in here. Now, he comes with 2 sets of caps, and we'll be looking at those. But this is the red set. This is removable. And it can also go in the backpack, but we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And I just think the shield looks nice even with just the caps here. Of course, it can plug right into the new gauntlet piece, which might have been part of the reason that they decided to do this. And it can plug in on either side, and it plugs in pretty securely. As you can see, he looks pretty great with that shield, so I think that's a fine addition. I really do like the new gold rendition of the Power Sword. It still has like the wraps around it like we've been seeing in this particular version. What's good is that this appears to be a white plastic and not paint, as we've seen in this line back in some of the older releases. Indeed, anytime they try to paint the hilt of this stuff, the paint seems to wear off pretty easily. So I'm really glad that that wasn't the case here, and they've learned their lesson, it seems. Now, onto the back with that backpack we mentioned earlier. There's a couple of different action features back here, actually. You can actually make it kind of click, which, in the old release, basically the caps would pop and there would be kind of that, a little bit of a gunpowder smell. Now, I never had the original, but of course, I'm a little bit too young to have had it. But I still think this is great, and this is so far kind of the most accurate and satisfying version of this that they've came up with. That still retains at least the feeling of popping those caps. Of course, this does open, and you can see that on the inside we have where you can load in the caps. Now, the red ones we looked at earlier, that's on the shield, you can totally load those as well. What I like is that you can even spin it back here and hear that sound, so that's great. And then I like the little details they put on the interior. Imagine how cool it would have looked if there was some metallic paint in there to really show off some of those details. But this is just more of one of those fun features they've included. Before we look at articulation, I think this would be a good time to actually relieve him of the extra armor right here. So I'll show you how it works. You can take out the hands, and he of course does include 2 alternate hands. They're just 2 fisted hands, but right now we have the gripping hands in. And these actually come off. So this is kind of a new one for me. It's just the bracers that he usually wears. and then you can proceed to slide these all the way off. They also disconnect right here at the joint, and it doesn't really impede his articulation because, as you can see, it can flex along with his arm. After that, you can just put the bracelet back on. It's kind of fun to keep him like this for a second because you can kind of see both sides of what he looks like, one with the big arm rig and one without. I'm a big fan of how the arm rig looks, but honestly, I think he looks just as good without it. I think it's just more of a personal preference thing. I really don't think there's much of an advantage for either one. It might actually be cool to keep one of them on, like his right hand, as if that's powering one of his thunder punches, and leaving one off. I think that might be a neat look. And here's He-Man without either one of them. Now to me, this is an incredible look right here, and it just looks so classic. And of course, we'll show you the articulation really quick. The head can go up and down, and there's a really good amount of movement there on the ball joint, so he can really dig his head down. Can't look up as much, but it works. He can go all the way around, of course. He can do a little bit of sway side to side, but it doesn't lock in very well. Down here at the chest, we have lots of movement with that brand new chest piece, and it looks really good no matter which way you move it. Not only that, he has a waist swivel. You can see that the straps want to come off sometimes on the backpack as you move them around. So that's something to be aware of. The arms, of course, go more than 90 degrees this way. You can bring them all the way around if you so desire. It does flex at the top of the bicep. You get a double joint at the elbow right there, even though his muscle kind of impedes it, as you can see. This part was a little stuck on me, and usually they're not, so I thought that was interesting. Not only that, but he does have a wrist swivel. And you can see that it does have the vertical hinge right there so that you can hold the sword up so that he can have the power. With the legs, they have the new articulation that we see with all the current releases where you actually get drop down hips. Now that just means that you can pull them down, and it allows you to kick way out much further than we could before. So it's a great addition, and I love how every single new figure that comes out has this feature. You can see that we have a swivel at the upper thigh. He can do the splits really well, way more than He-Man probably should be able to. You can see we have a double jointed knee, and we have a cut at the boot. We have ankle hinge, and we have ankle pivot. That means that He-Man should be able, theoretically, to get some really wide stances. So you can see he's balancing a little bit there. Should be no problem for Thunder Punch He-Man. Yep, looks good. I definitely want to look at these thunder punching effect accessories. Now, this is something Mattel's been doing since Classics. It appears that every time they do Thunder Punch He-Man, they're always sure to include their version of these. And I actually think this is the most successful that they've been so far. I just think that's a great kind of Dragon Ball Z-esque kind of accessory. It's just really big. There's lots of energy. They seem like comets, you know, like firing at your enemies. And they look really impressive. I also like how they did it. There's two little pegs in there, and I think the idea is it just puts a little pressure on each side of the open hands, and it really holds them in securely. So you can really, you know, go for it. He-Man going nuts here. That's He-Man, not Conan. Anyway, but they'll stay in pretty much. So I really love how these look. And I think that it's also worth pointing out that with this new chest piece, I feel like New Eternia He-Man and just Masterverse He-Man in general finally has the exact correct modern He-Man proportions. Now, I've always thought that the Mondo figures, the 6 scale, which are way too expensive for me to afford, but I've always thought that that had the perfect proportions of like what a modern He-Man figure should have. And with this new chest piece that they have, the upper chest, He-Man finally has that in these Masterverse figures. And this head size is perfect too, if you ask me. So to me, this is exactly right for a modernized kind of take on what He-Man's proportions ought to be. Speaking of proportions, I think that it would be a fine idea to go ahead and take off this whole rig and show you that yes, you have a couple of different options. Now, like every other He-Man in this line and every other figure, honestly, He-Man's head easily pops off. So if you wanted to do, you know, more of the jungle He-Man that we saw at the beginning of the mini comics without the harness at all, you can totally do that, and it looks really good. So I think that that just shows you how good that those proportions are, and I love the extra paint work. You can see that it makes a world of difference on this guy. Now, people can say what they want to about Mattel, But one thing you can't say is that they're not accommodating to collectors of their He-Man lines, because with all the kind of extra accessibility and compatibility that they provide between the He-Man lines, it pretty much gives you a virtual playground of options that you can use between your figures. Say, for instance, here we have, the Origins Thunder Punch He-Man, which we'll compare here in a little while. But I can actually take off the chest piece. To me, it is absolutely wilder than all get out that I can do this. I mean, there's no tricks here. I'm not having to do anything special to fit it on. I literally just took the vest from the Origins Deluxe Thunder Punch He-Man that I got years ago and threw it right on there, and it fits like a glove. So I'm telling you, this kind of compatibility, it's amazing that you can do this. You don't have to wonder about what a more classic version of this guy would look like, because you can just create it. So just make it. I mean, most of us already will have more versions of this guy laying around. It's unbelievable that you can do this. I think that's amazing. Heck, while you're at it, do this. Even the heads work. So you can have this super tall, kind of beefed up, more proportional version of classic Thunder Punch He-Man. Oh, but more options abound. You can even use that 40th anniversary He-Man head, even if it's a little pale for this particular body. And what if you want a demake of the figure in Origin style? Do it. Throw the head on there, get the brand new harness, and voila. You have a totally awesome looking demake of the figure. It's incredible. Say you're wondering how the new head might look on the 40th anniversary body. Throw it on there and find out. The color may not match exactly right, but hey, it looks all right for my money. And although it may be slightly loose fitting on this figure, if you do want to see what this might look like as a classic He-Man, there you go. And I think the answer is it looks pretty darn good. Now, before we get to the comparisons and the wrap up, I told you that I would give you my take about this head sculpt. As I said, unsurprisingly, there's a huge range of opinions about this head sculpt. I've seen people hate it. I've seen people defend it. It's all over the place. Now, for me, I have no problem whatsoever with this head sculpt. I have seen a few reviews where it did look a little weird. Maybe something about the eye placement or something about the eye application on this guy looked a little strange in some of those. But I think part of that might have been the lighting that those reviewers were using, kind of casting shadows down from the eyes, almost making it look like he had an eyeliner or an eyeshadow or something. Kind of made him look a little strange. Instead, here, to me, it looks perfectly natural. The jawline looks terrific. That's certainly not a problem. It was a problem that I had to correct using the hot water trick that I shown in a previous video for that Masters Universe Revolution Battle Armor figure. But here, no such issue exists. It's as square-jawed and proportional as you would like. I think one thing that might be throwing some folks off could be the really, really strong angular cheekbones. I don't have any issue with that. I think the bigger problem would be if he didn't really have them or they weren't very well defined. Instead, I just think that adds to it. It gives the face a lot of character. I would love to see them do a version of this exact same head sculpt with a happier expression. I think this is the intense expression, as it should be for the Thunder Punch figure, because I definitely think he's, calling on some major power here to defeat a foe or something like that. So I'm going to have to majorly disagree with people who are giving criticism to this head sculpt. I'm in the camp that thinks it's brilliant. This is exactly what I hoped it would be like when I saw the Faker head sculpt, and we were all excited by that head sculpt and thought, well, there's potential, for a really good He-Man head sculpt. For my money, this is by far the best He-Man head sculpt that we've had in the Masterverse line. To me, it is very accurate to my perception of the character. I think it looks fantastic. Now, feel free to disagree with me in the comments or whatever and tell me how crazy I am or blind I am or whatever. But I kind of think He-Man fans have sort of stared into the abyss for a little too long on the huge variety of He-Man head sculpts, and now it's getting to a point to where I don't want to say necessarily nitpicky, but I want to say that it's kind of just people are starting to lose a little bit of objectivity. Of course, it's a subjective thing, but but I kind of think people's perspectives are being warped a little bit, because I really am having a hard time believing that anybody couldn't look at this and be like, man, that is incredible looking. I think that they just knocked it out of the park. I'm not even sure what I would say that they could do any better here. Your mileage may vary. Look at the paint sample if you can, but I couldn't be happier. This is fantastic looking. By the way, a quick hack on the shield. They leave just enough of a knob that connects to his gauntlet that you can actually hold it with his bare hands, so you don't have to have those gauntlets attached for him to use the Thunder Shield. All right, we definitely have to do a couple of comparisons. Of course, my favorite comparisons to do are between the Classics version and the Origins version. Here is the Origins version of Thunder Punch He-Man. And of course, this is fantastic for what it's trying to accomplish. In my review of him, I was a little disappointed about a couple of aspects, particularly how they didn't capitalize very much on the idea of the caps from the original toy, but I thought that he was a pretty effective update. Of course, to make it a little more of a comparison, I'll give him his Thunder Punching accessory as well, so that you can see a little bit more of a through line there visually. And I think these guys are great companion pieces, but they're just trying to accomplish something completely different. But visually and articulation, you know, it's this guy all day long. He's just an incredible piece. I think is certainly more successful as a figure for 2024 than, say, the Origins Thunder Punch He-Man. Of course, this brings me to the more interesting of the two comparisons that is actually a lot more of an apt comparison, I feel. And that's with the old Thunder Punch He-Man from Classics. Now, when it comes to the comparison between these two guys, it's certainly a lot more of an interesting matchup, because they're not necessarily going for two really different things. They're both trying to be, you know, 6.5 inch, 7 inch scale updates of that old classic toy. One clearly skews more towards being a little more faithful to, say, the way that the harness was and things like that for the original figure. For this line, for Classics, there was more of a premium paint deco going on. So that's why you have things like the actual vac metallization. It's obvious to anybody looking at this what the deal is. This guy is as pale as a ghost. He's as pale as me. I think he's whiter than I am. And I remember at the time there was like the Horseman or Scott Knightlick or somebody, they were trying to, I think they said there had been so many He-Man, you know, bucks at that point, so many He-Man versions. They wanted to do something a little different with the skin tone. I remember in the mini comics at that time, or the bios, I guess it was the bios, we're talking about how during this time He-Man was like in Subternia and he was underground, and there was some speculation in the community that maybe he was like, you know, kind of pale because he'd been underground when he was framed for being an Eternian criminal or something in the bios. Those bios are crazy. They were kind of fun though to read at the time. You know, this kind of paleness really did, I think, hurt the visual identity of the figure a little bit. Didn't ruin it or anything, but it seemed a little odd, you know, to see Thunder Punch He-Man look that pale. Not only that, still using that original Classics He-Man head sculpt, and there wasn't a whole lot wrong with that, but it was starting to age a little bit by that point in the line. And of course, later the Horsemen would knock it out of the park with their updated kind of Neo original He-Man head sculpt, which, you know, I got first with the subscriber figure, the Savage He-Man, but they hadn't got there yet. And of course, they never made a version of that Savage He-Man head with this light skin tone, so it's not like you could go back and update it and it wouldn't look right at all. So it does look more dated, even though this had, you know, premium paint application, and I think might have actually been a little more expensive because it was, you know, made in, I guess, more limited quantities than, say, a mass market line. You know, all those years ago, even more expensive than this is now in 2024, you've got kind of a quandary here, because even though he had some premium paint applications like with that vac metallization, this guy has full-on paint highlights like through his entire body. That's about as premium to me as it gets for a He-Man figure. I don't think you can ask for a whole lot more in terms of paint. You know, maybe a wash or some vac metal on the vest, but other than that, there's not really a whole lot left to do. So to me, it's even more decisive than him beating out Origins. Like he beats the Classics version out easily. It's a knockout. Better articulation. For my money, better sculpting. No disrespect to the Horsemen at all. This was many years ago. Who knows what they could do now. Better paint applications over here aside from the vac metal. being used right here. So this is an absolute knockout, and usually it's not that decisive. You know, you've seen me do these comparisons, and a lot of the time it's a begrudging victory for the old classics version, but not this time. This guy easily wins. And here he is with both of them. Like I said, I am slightly too young to have owned the original, so I simply don't have it. But I figure the Origins version over here is analogous enough of that original. All right, friends, so a few final thoughts here about Masterverse New Eternia Thunder Punch He-Man. This guy will run you right around that $22, $23 mark. It amazes me that Mattel is able to offer a figure of this quality for that low price point, that $22, $23. I mean, when you look at a figure like this, it really does make an argument for how on earth are people sleeping on the Masterverse series. I am glad to say that Snout Spout was actually the first sellout in terms of their direct-to-consumer line that they have going on Mattel Creations for Masterverse. So that definitely shows that there's still life left in the line. But at the same time, I know that Origins seems to get all the attention, but you look at a figure like this He-Man, and it amazes me that it does, because this figure truly does represent a quantum leap forward in terms of Masters figures, and I think that it's just a great product. I was really impressed by what they did here. I could go on and on about it all day, but this is definitely one of the very best He-Men that they've released in the line so far. It's definitely stands toe-to-toe with the Masters Universe Revolution figure that they came out with. That was, once again, a new standard for He-Men that they'd come out with in the line. I definitely would advise you to tune out a lot of the negativity that you're seeing about this head sculpt. I'm not really sure. I'm not necessarily sure what's bringing it about. I do think that He-Man fans have kind of stared into the void a little too long on analyzing He-Man head sculpts and what they should be or what they shouldn't be, and it's kind of skewing some people a little bit. I do caution, so I definitely want you to get it in hand before you make a determination about that and see just how cool this guy is for yourself. They've knocked it out of the park. So should you pick it up? Absolutely you should. If you haven't even gotten a He-Man in this line so far, this is the one to get. He will absolutely grace your shelf and look fantastic. So I know that this is going to be a big win for anybody who picks it up, particularly because of all the incredible customization options that Mattel affords you these days by making their figures so interchangeable and modular. He comes with a vast array of accessories, honestly, for his very low price point, and you have an absolute winner. Keep in mind that if you stick around for the end of this video, you will actually see some bonus configurations and extra He-Man head swaps that I'll put at the very end, so be sure to stick around for that. And I want to thank you for watching today. Truly, this means a lot to me. I am less than a month away from the birth of my first child, so certainly we do appreciate you liking, subscribing, all that good stuff, because it helps us out. And of course, I want to thank all the He-Man fans who always comment down below and who always have such wonderful things to say. I spent a lot of time as a teenager on the He-Man.org boards, and sometimes that was a good experience. A lot of the times it was a very bad experience and kind of made me question exactly what kind of fan community that Masters had. But thankfully, through my YouTube channel, I've seen that a lot of the fan community are just absolutely top-notch people. And I do appreciate that very much and want to thank you all so much for all the support that you've shown me, and especially all the good conversation that we've had down below. I really do appreciate it. Agree or disagree, I really do appreciate those comments. So keep them coming. All right, so a couple of bonus configurations. One thing that I was definitely wanting to show is that he's pretty compatible with the brand new Masters Universe Revolution He-Man. So if you just want to do a flip-flop on the heads right there, you can see that you can get some cool results. Since the skin tones match plenty well enough, you can see that you can get a kind of animation Netflix style Thunder Punch He-Man over there, which looks really good. But perhaps the more exciting combination of the two is that you can get a very classic looking He-Man with the brand new head. Of course, he may not be wearing the Iron Cross chest harness, but I still think it looks really good. But honestly, I think you could do this head swap about all day, and it really does look like either one of these figures could have been released in these configurations, and it just seems completely natural. So these are definitely two cool options that you have. And even though the bracers may be the wrong color to be a classic He-Man necessarily, I think that highlighted body does a whole lot of heavy lifting to make the classic look even better. Those extra highlights and paint washing really looks fantastic. Of course, He-Man's gauntlet from that figure is removable, so this is an idea of what it might look like, and you can see I'm hiding that other red bracer with the shield, so you can kind of get a better idea in your imagination of what it could be like. And here's how it looks if you want to upgrade that battle armor accessory that the new Revolution version came with. And that is just a fantastic look. To me, it looks even better than the Revolution head with the battle armor, especially because this head is larger. I think that it kind of alleviates how bulky everything looks once you put a huge set of armor over the already huge He-Man. So I actually think this is preferable right here. This is the alternate head that came with movie He-Man. I did use the hot water trick to kind of resculpt the jaw to be a little more proportional. This head is a little yellowy for this body, but I think it still looks pretty decent. But why would you go with this when you have the infinitely superior new head? And if you're like me, you love that awesome new third-party head of Dolph Lundgren from the He-Man movie. And man, this will mess with your brain a little bit, right? I wish we'd seen something like this in the movie. But hey, pretty cool, I gotta say. And here's this, because why not? Certainly looks a little odd, I think. Yeah, this is a little strange. Yeah, it doesn't quite work, but hey. And the head swap that absolutely no one asked for, the original Classics head on the new body. No one is as dedicated to backwards compatibility in action figure heads as Mattel, because this head still plugs in perfectly. And here's a little Filmation action for you with a brand new cartoon collection He-Man head. I think that looks pretty cool on this body, actually. You can do this too. I mean, it works. And although it wasn't a perfect head by any means, here is the original new Eternia, more classic He-Man looking head on this Thunder Punch body. And, I think it looks decent, but we've come a long way. Let's look at all the He-Man heads side by side. Here we have it, every representation of He-Man's head in the Masterverse line so far, at least as of spring 2024. This is quite a gallery right here. Ranging from the truly horrible to the truly awesome. You have pretty much every type of He-Man head you could ever imagine. And this is what I'm saying when I'm saying that kind of fans they've kind of stared too long at He-Man's head in Masterverse, and I think they've been pulled in too many directions and they've seen too many extremes, because I think it has started to kind of wear on them a little bit, and now they're either hypercritical or they're not even sure what they're looking at anymore. But indeed, I just thought it was important to have a good look at every one of them that's been represented so far, including Fakers, but not including the two Prince Adam head sculpts for the Revolution line, since those are Prince Adam and not necessarily him in his He-Man'd up form. But still, interesting look here. And in case you were wondering what it looked like for him to ride the Revolution Battle Cat from Masterverse, there's a look, and it seems to work out really well. Well, friends, if you stuck around this long for all the bonus content and the extra looks that we had and all the different combinations and things, I really do thank you, because that was quite a feat. And thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I thought that I would reward your loyalty with this really cool shot that we have here of He-Man fighting Faker, since of course these guys do share the same head sculpt. But it's kind of funny, because since Faker, they developed this new upper body piece, and now He-Man is more buff than Faker. So it turns out they figured out that Faker was a fake because he was kind of scrawny looking. So I just think this is great. It's great to see these two guys go up against each other. We knew eventually that Faker head sculpt would be repurposed as He-Man, so it's just cool to see it finally happen. And as I said earlier, guys, really appreciate you all. Be sure to leave a comment down below. God bless. Take care.